Okay.
We're asking where you.
Okay, so welcome everyone to our monthly Travelogue program. We haven't had one for a couple of months, but welcome back. And we've got an amazing presentation this evening from Reverend Irene. And she's going to take us high up to China and the Philippines. So we've got a long flight ahead of us. So we want you to sit back, relax. Have your drink ready, and we will start momentarily. But first, I would like to ask Jackie to say an opening prayer.
Beer all over here.
Okay, and before we do this, may I suggest to everybody, you might want to mute yourselves. And then if you have a question, you can raise your hand or unmute. And Reverend Irene said it's fine to ask questions as we go along. So it's good to have it muted because then it's not distracting for the presenter. So our opening prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we praise you for the gift of our fellowship that your Spirit creates in our faith family at Westminster United Church. You have placed others perfectly in our lives and inspire us as Christians to work together with the gifts that we have been blessed with. When we look at this gathering through your eyes, we see your gifts fostered in us, and we further your plan. Please guide Reverend Irene as she takes us on a journey of her travels, and bless her and bless us all. Amen.
Amen.
Oh, and you can also, do I switch that?
You have to put Reverend Irene on
Yes.
share.
I've already, Reverend Irene is already on share. And if you want to, everybody put it on speaker view, you'll be a little bit better, and I'll actually be able to pin Reverend Irene. So let me do that right now. There we go. Okay, Reverend Irene.
Okay. Well, let me just say a few words before I start the slides. So it's an honor to be sharing with you. It's been a while since I took this trip, 2012. So that's 9 years ago. So I had to go back in my mind and had to go into my hard drive to get these photos. But it was part of my sabbatical when I went there when I was serving at Northminster United Church. I had been there for five years or more. So I was able to take a 3 to 4 month sabbatical. But I spent about 2 months in China and the Philippines. And the purpose of my trip was to learn more about my roots, because I was born in the Philippines, but my grandparents were from China. So that was one purpose. Another purpose was to learn more about the social political situation in the Philippines. And finally, to learn more about the United Church of Christ in the Philippines and the United Methodist Church in the Philippines, which are Protestant churches that would be part of our family, United Church of Canada family. So, and how we in Canada can be more welcoming to these members, our partners. So I want to thank the United Church of Canada and our United Church of Canada partners in the Philippines for making this possible, because they helped to arrange the exposure trip. So you'll see that I've had exposure into different groups. So without further ado, I'm going to share. Okay, China, Philippines. See. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, it looks good.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so that's, first of all, our daughter Julia came with me. Lee did not come. He was home looking after our son at the time, who was 18 years old, choosing university and that kind of thing. So Julia, our 20-year-old, came with me. She was in the middle of university year, so she was able to come. It was May 2012. And so I started, I didn't do the traditional trip of China. So if you came to look at the Great Wall, I'm sorry, you'll be disappointed. There's no Great Wall of China here. But I mainly just spent just a week in China, and then most of my trip was Philippines. So China, I just did the southeast part of China, which is where my grandparents are from. And that's Xiamen, Xiamen. Can you see it down there?
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
pointing to it. It's across from Taiwan.
Yep.
In the early 1900s, my ancestors, probably grandparents, left Xiamen and took a boat and went to the Philippines. Okay, so that's how my parents were born in the Philippines. So most of my ancestors came from around Xiamen, which used to be called Amoy, and it's south part of Fujian province.
There's going to be a test after this.
I don't know, they just laugh. Okay, if you have any questions right away, just pop in. So this is a scene of Xiamen. It used to be called Amoy. So I speak a dialect. I was raised in the Philippines, but we kept our Chinese culture. So I could speak the dialect of Xiamen, it's called Fukinese. So I could communicate with them. And this was not my first time to Xiamen. I went there in 1988 when I was teaching English in China, in Nanjing. And that's when I discovered Xiamen and found all these places. So this is my second time there to bring our daughter there to those places. So this is some of the modern parts of Xiamen. And that's our daughter, Julia. We're at the beach. There's lots of beaches. By 2012, there were a lot of tourists, like Chinese tourists. When I was there in 1988, there weren't as many tourists on this little island, but by 2012, there were a lot of tourists. Oh, and I have some relatives in Xiamen. This is my aunt's husband's sister. So I called her second aunt. And she lived in Xiamen. So she took Julia and I to a vegetarian restaurant. And by then, Julia was already a vegetarian. So this was a vegetarian restaurant run by Buddhists. So it was very, very delicious. Some dried fish being dried on the streets.
Wow.
Can anyone guess what this is? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Tilapia?
No,
Oh,
keep guessing.
Squid?
No,
Oh, no.
keep trying.
is it fish?
Herring?
It's some kind of fish. It comes from water.
Frog legs?
No kidding.
Yes. Okay, I think Jackie said it.
Frog legs?
Yes, frog legs.
That's not fish.
Well, I said
It's amphibian.
Lee says it's an amphibian. Well, it came from water. That's
Yes,
what I said. I didn't say
That's
yes.
that's right.
So I had frog legs in the Philippines, but I had this in China. So
Yum.
it was delicious. It's a bit like tender chicken.
What do they serve it with, Irene?
And this is out. It was pan fried with probably soy sauce and garlic.
Ah,
This is outside a Buddhist temple, and they sell all kinds of souvenirs and paraphernalia, paper, gold and paper money, paper houses, all kinds of things that you would, incense, things that you would need to around the Buddhist temple to worship. Yes. Okay. I'm not as familiar with Buddhism, but I know some of my ancestors were Buddhists. And when I was growing up, I did see how they venerated the ancestors. you would light incense, you would put food on certain anniversaries and remember your ancestors. And you would have ancestral pictures of your ancestors at your home, so you could respect them.
Mhm.
So this is still in Xiamen. So Xiamen is a big city, but it also has an island. So some of the pictures I showed to you were from the island called Gulangyu. Starts with a G, Gulangyu. Very beautiful island, as I said, and now it's inundated with tourists. But my family, one of my father's side, came from there, and I still have some relatives there. And this aunt attends this church, and it's called Trinity Church. So you see the characters, 3, 1 church.
Interesting.
San Yi Tang, meaning 3-1 church. It's Trinity Church. And it's a Protestant church. And this is the inside of it. And they have PowerPoint in Chinese characters, pianists, choir. What does that remind you of? Doesn't it remind you of home?
Sure does.
Yeah, and the church was full. So, as you may know, during the Cultural Revolution in China, a lot of churches were destroyed, and it was discouraged. Everything colonial had to be destroyed, but some churches survived. So this church survived. And so my aunt was a devout Christian, and when we were there, it was Mother's Day, and they were handing out roses to every woman, including myself. So all the women stood up, and all the children came forward and gave us each a rose.
Mm,
So it was quite lovely.
sounds
So
like
now,
Westminster.
next scene, we're going to another place. Yeah, it's very similar what we might do, right? So the next scene is another place in China. Now we're back to the mainland, not on an island, but again near Xiamen, in a small village. I don't know the name in English, but this was where my mother's father came from. And this is my ancestral home, my ancestral house. It was in better condition when I went there in 1988. So now it's 2012. In 1988, there were still people living in it. And how I found the house was I had instructions about how to get to the town. This was 1988 when I first went there. I had the name of the town, and basically all Lim family lived there. My mother's last name was Lim, and I had the name of her grandfather. So I just showed the name to any villager that walked by, and they took me to this house. And in the house, I found some people who were people who were guarding the house for my family. So these were the people. They're older now, but in 1988, I found them living in the house. And of course, they welcomed me, and they showed me pictures of my mother's family. They had, a long time ago when they went to the Philippines, they sent pictures of my family to them. So they kept it there. So my mother as a child was in that picture. So I knew I had come to the right home.
Now,
Yes?
these are not your family members, right? These are just
Correct.
people living in the house?
Yeah, they were not related to us, but they were, because all my family left and went to the Philippines, but they were charged with guarding the house, looking after the house.
Oh,
So they
Is
lived
it-
in it. Yeah,
This is Julia on one side, right?
yeah, that's Julia on the
Yeah.
left. The others were 4 brothers living there with their wives. So that was 1988. Now in 2012, when I went there, the house is no longer inhabitable. It's not in good condition. And all the 4 brothers are doing really well. They used to be sugarcane farmers. That's what most of the people in that town were, growing sugarcane or rice. So that's what probably my mother would have been had she had her parents, had they not left the Philippines. My mother's parents, had they not left China. My mother's parents were from China. They got married in China, and they had their first 4 kids in China. and they went to the Philippines in the early 1930s and had the rest of the kids in the Philippines. They had 11 kids altogether.
Wow.
My mom was the fourth daughter. So my mother was born in the Philippines. So yeah, nobody was left in China. So these folk looked after the home. And they wanted me to tell my relative in the Philippines to see if they can sell the building, because they can't do anything with it. It's still under my family's ownership. So I told an uncle of mine about it. He has been there. So I told him what he had to do, but I don't know if he has done it. It's very difficult. You have to get all the signatures of the relatives to sign a piece of paper to agree to sell the place. Anyway, this is still in China. They invited me to their home. Now they're doing really well. They have their own homes and they're doing different things for business. Some are selling rocks, doing other kinds of business. And this is a ancestral book that they had. And this is very fascinating because they showed it to me and I could find my relatives' names in this book. They recorded every birth from this village and my family's name was in it. So I can't read every word, but I could make out the name of my mother and the name of her parents in it. So this is a larger view of the town, of the typical homes that would have been like the one that my grandfather came from. But now these are the newer houses being built. As you can see, they're built very close together, but they're now huge houses. They're like building, 3 to 5 story. And they said it's for when their kids get married, they can have their reception in the house. Okay, so now we're going to the Philippines. So Philippines, there are 3 major regions in the Philippines. There is Luzon. Can you see the arrow? Okay, so there's Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And Philippines, these are small. I'm not sure it's a small place compared to Canada. Okay, Lisa says there's 80,000 islands. But what's the population of Canada? Anybody? Okay, Lisa's 36 million. Well, in the Philippines,
Yeah,
there's
36
111.
34 million.
36. 34 million. Okay, Philippines, there's 111 million.
Really?
Yeah.
Good
It's
night.
3 times the number of people as in Canada. Okay. So Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, basically Manila is where I'm from. So we're going to start with Manila, and then we're going to go to the other 2 regions. You might have heard of Palawan. That's a famous tourist place. Tony Super probably sells trips there. I want to go there someday, Palawan. I haven't been there, but I was in Luzon, and I did go to Visayas, to Cebu, and I did go to Mindanao, Cagayan de Oro. It was quite cheap to travel within the Philippines on the Cebu Air. So part of my trip was visiting relatives. So I won't go into the names, but they're my relatives, cousins, and so on. And Julia is eating halo halo. And I was hoping that Carmelita and Jerry were here because they would know what it is. So it's halo halo literally means mix. And it's mixture of ice cream, ice, fruits, different kinds of preserved fruits and fresh fruits.
Looks delicious.
Yeah, very fattening, but good. And that's a cousin of mine, my uncle's daughter, Ellie. And this is behind us is the volcano called Taal volcano. And I think recently it erupted. And these are my relatives, my father's stepbrother and his wife. His wife died two years ago, Nancy. And this is the home where I stayed in. It was my uncle's house. It's they are more upper class or middle class, and it's in a gated community. So a lot of the nicer homes, they have to be behind gates because as you know, there's a lot of poverty in the Philippines, a lot of unemployment. And so it's not as safe as it is here. You can't just go out and take a walk. You have to be very careful with your belongings. And this is the same home. This is an aunt, and she has died now, but this was 2012. Okay, so part of my trip was going to see where I used to live, bringing Julia there. And as I've mentioned in some of my sermons, I lived in St. Stephen's Parish, an Anglican church compound. My mother was the treasurer, and I've had roots there, and I've since discovered one of my great-grandfather was a deacon of the Methodist Church. He was one of the first people employed to minister to the Chinese people in Manila. And so he was Methodist, but he worked with the Anglican Church. So now I went from the Anglican to the United Church. So I have roots in the Methodist Church, you see. So this was the basketball court of the compound, and I live just over there. You see the house that I'm pointing to behind the basketball net. So I lived there for the first 12 years of my life, and I used to play basketball, and we had a great fun. We had the whole place to run around and play.
And now she's in mourning that the basketball finals ended.
Well, the basketball, I was reignited because of the Toronto Raptors. So the house, I'll show you a close-up of the house. So that's the house we lived in. It's a semi-detached, two-story, two-bedroom house. It's not in great condition now. Nobody's living in it. I think they're going to tear it down. So that's Julia and I visiting. So I couldn't take her inside because it was closed up. But there used to be, I think there still is 2 fruit trees in front. One is a star fruit and one is something else. And we used to eat the fruits off the tree. This is a famous park in Manila called Luneta Park. We would often go there for walks in the evenings. And this is an example of Manila is a walled city. Philippines has gone through a lot of wars. It was occupied by Spain for 500 years. And then they were involved Philippines was involved in a war with Spain, with Americans on their side, and Americans promised the Philippines that they would get their independence. But once they beat the Spaniards, the Americans took over. So they lied to the Philippines. They took over for another 50 years. So Philippines didn't get its independence till 1945. And these, of course, we did some cultural things. This is in a restaurant where they show you the kind of dance, tinikling. Has anyone seen that? It's bamboo, and you have to be careful you don't get your feet caught between the bamboo poles. And I got to try it. All right. This is a quiet group. Any questions so far? Okay.
Actually, Reverend Irene, most of us have muted ourselves
Okay.
because we don't want to keep disturbing you. That's why. But I'm sure we're all, Tony and I are chuckling it. We were waiting for that basketball court as well. So no, it's really good. Do you want us off of mute, or do you want
No, it's fine.
It's better to stay on mute. Okay.
Quieter, yeah. But if you have a question, just put your hand. I can't see everybody. I can only see 4 people, but just speak up.
Sure, we can go to midnight.
These are just some more tourist shots. This is with my cousin. It's called Pagsanhan Falls. And you ride a boat into the falls. There's a guide that takes you in.
Is this in Manila?
Just outside of Manila. Yeah,
Okay.
close to Manila. Like an hour's drive. Okay, so now we're going to go, I just forget, okay. Now we're going to go to Cebu area and Bohol. Okay, Cebu is in Visayas. So we take a plane to Cebu, and then I'm going to show you Bohol as well. I mean, there's so many beaches there, but we picked to go to the beach near Bohol. This is called Chocolate Hills. So it's one of the tourist places when you go to Bohol. You visit these chocolate hills because it looks like chocolate. I think in real life it's brown, more brown than that. And you might have seen these animals. They're quite small, maybe the size of your hand. Like, yeah, called tarsier. Tarsier.
Tarsier.
Little monkeys. Yeah, and it's only there, not available in many places. So you go into a little, like an outdoor kind of zoo, and they're all over. And this is another part of the tours. You go on a river cruise on the Lubbock River, and the cruise includes entertainment. All these people come on board and start singing to you. And there's also a meal, like a big banquet, buffet meal on that cruise. There's my air there. Oh, how did I do that? Okay. That's when I could fly.
Look at the joy in your face on that one.
Yeah, yeah. I took off my sandals and could feel the water and the sand. It was great.
I think she's
How does the
being
water
dropped from
feel?
a
Is
balloon or
it
something.
cold or kind of warm?
It's warm.
Mhm.
It's warm, not like Canada. So on the beach, there's quite a few people, and there are people always offering to sell you things and to also offer a massage, of course. I never did get one, I should have, but they're offering massage for a price. And this is in Cebu. I had relatives in Cebu. This is a fresh coconut. Okay, I repeat the map again for you, just so to remember. So we were in Bohol, and now we're going to the south, Mindanao. I also have relatives there. And there's a lot of Muslims that live in Mindanao also, but I
Really?
didn't have any. Yeah, there's a
Muslims.
big population.
Wow.
But I was in Cagayan de Oro, which is the capital of Mindanao, because I have relatives in Cagayan de Oro. And they live in this building. It's called Betty Building. Actually, Betty is my mother's sister's name, so I guess it's her building. She has passed away now, but she had 13 children. So all her children are like, all have children. So there's a big family. So I stayed with them, at that building. They all have businesses. So one of the business they have is a store. It's like a department store called Siabon Swan, which is the name of my aunt. She has died a long time ago, but her name is everywhere. That's her store, and her children, manage it now. And my cousin, who is her son, is a dentist. Dr. Benjamin Lim Sia is my cousin. I just messaged it with him on Facebook, and he said he's retired now, but his wife, Dr. Sandy Tankiko Sia, is still working. So the two of them own this clinic, and both their sons. No, I'm getting confused. Okay, never mind. I think one of their children want to be a dentist as well. Oh, this is a lot of fun. So the river, the Mindanao Cagayan River, provides these river rafting. It's fun, but unfortunately, just like a month before, 2 months before we arrived, there was a tragedy because the river like rose suddenly overnight when people were sleeping, and a lot of people died.
Oh, dear.
So this river can be, dangerous. So for the people who lived by the river, they had no chance to leave. It just like rose overnight while they were sleeping. So we've arrived 2 months later, and things have become much better, of course. So we were able to do this river rafting tour.
That's really fun.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, very similar to what you would do in other places in Canada. All right, I have the map again because now we're going back to to Luzon, okay? And we're going to go north now to Baguio. Baguio is a summer capital of the Philippines. It's a little bit cooler, and we used to go visit there. When I was growing up, we used to go there on a summer trip to get some cooler air, and there were pine trees there. And I always remember that, going to Baguio for our summer. Okay. Oops, not yet. Okay, this is still Manila. This is back in Manila. So these are some of our partners in the Philippines, the United Church partners, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, the General Council, anyway, the National Council of the Philippines, NCCP. Yeah, so some of the representatives are there. They were giving me an orientation of the Philippines, the political situation, all of that. You see a slideshow. So Julia and I got lots of talks and lots of information about that.
What
And
language would they be speaking, Irene?
They spoke to me in English. They all are fluent in English. There's different dialects in the Philippines. The national dialect is Tagalog, but depending on what region you go to, there are different dialects. I used to speak Tagalog, but I don't speak it anymore. So I appreciate that they can speak English because it was colonized by the United States. For better or for worse, the school system is American. So everybody speaks English who goes to school.
But Tagalog is impregnated with Spanish. The first language.
Yeah, but Tagalog has some Spanish words, so it's easier for me to learn Spanish because it's in my brain when I was growing up. So this is in a place called Parañaque in the Philippines, and we were brought to, basically I was brought to visit people who were living in squatters. I'd never been in squatters before. I always look at it from far and, see how they live. But this time we were brought into it. So there were about 400 houses in this little place with 2,000 people living in these houses. And their main activities were fishing and mussel breeding. And of course, a lot of them also work outside. They go out to work as laundry women, as drivers, as vendors, and so on. But they have it's very crowded condition. And of course, the sanitary conditions are not very good. But still, they have a Christian ministry there called Kairos Philippines. And we met them, and they have a community chapel in there where they do education, worship, environment, and justice and peace. So very impressive. And they also go on protest marches in solidarity with other people, with oppressed people. And this is a visit I made to Union Theological Seminary in Cavite, which is just an hour south of Manila. And it's a round chapel, as you can see. And these are some of the students. Yes? These are some of the students. And this man on the right is still a friend of mine on Facebook. And I remember this man in the middle speaking. I sat in on a meeting after chapel, and they were talking about going on a protest march because of farmers who were to be in solidarity with farmers, and some of them were being harassed by the government. So it's amazing what they do. You know, they're very socially and political aware and active. You know, they're not just studying there, but they also are doing things and helping the farmers nearby. And these are some of the staff from the seminary. And Norma Dolaga has come to Canada on a partner visit, and I've seen her in Canada as well. Okay, this is Baguio. We're getting to Baguio, the summer town that I told you about. That's, you know, cooler air. So I've got long sleeve shirt this time because Manila is so hot. You know, you just want to wear no sleeves. But the fact that I have sleeves on shows that I'm in the cooler place now.
The scenery is just stunning, Reverend Irene.
Yes, yes.
Is there much climate
Now we're
change?
coming to also around, pardon?
I just wondered if there was climate change in any other part of this area, or is it mostly always the same?
Oh, does the climate vary? Like,
Well, no, has it been changed?
no, I think
by
she's,
global
no,
warming?
I don't think she's asking that. You're saying, is the weather different in each part?
I wondered if at certain times of the year it gets colder
Oh.
or warmer in some parts.
Generally in the Philippines, there are only two seasons, the dry and rainy season.
Ah,
Yeah, so it's always hot all year round, but it's just a question of dry or rain.
okay.
So one of the partners we have in the Philippines is called Cordillera People's Alliance, CPA. And they took us to two communities that are affected by mining. And a lot of these minings are owned by Canada, Canadian interests. There's a lot I can talk about this, but this is just one example. Mankayan. Mankayan is inhabited by an indigenous group. Okay, a lot of these places are inhabited by indigenous group, and it used to be agriculture was their primary livelihood. But then the mining came since 1903 to this province, and but often they have come and they have left, and often they don't leave the place in good condition. They just leave behind, you know, very. I'll show you a picture of mine tailings. See, this is a photo of the mine tailings. It's all bad stuff. This is all contaminated, and it affects the land beside it. Like, it affects their water.
Wow.
It contaminates their water, and it affects the land beside it. So it's all contaminated. They can't plant things.
Wow.
And as well, okay, this is where two rivers, they took us here. There's two rivers flowing. The one on the left is actually the clean one. The one on the right is the contaminated one. So guess what? They come together and become one. So you can't separate the clean and the dirty. Once they come together, they're together. So they don't have clean water. And in one of the towns, they have to lug water from Baguio. You have to bring water in. And these are people who, you know, rely on the land for their livelihood, for agriculture. And the other problem we saw in this picture is that because the mine groups they leave behind a huge hole, like 50 meters underground. And so when you're standing there, apparently the land is shifting all the time, and it causes damage to buildings, farms, and property. And in one couple of cases, a whole high school has fallen through, has been damaged. There was an entire primary school building that was swept away in a landslide. So all it takes is a landslide, and it comes down, and there was a person who died with it. And of course, the mining company Lepanto does not take any responsibility they just say it's the landslide. But the people know it's not the landslide. It's the land was weak in the first place. So imagine underneath 50 meters, there's nothing underneath.
Mine shafts.
Mine shafts. Yeah, they just leave it like that. They don't clean up. So in the town of Mankayan, we witnessed a barricade. The people, the community do not want the mining company to expand. So they have put up a barricade. I was there in May, and they have been so they say no to mining expansion. They have been, and this is a big machine that's not able to go in because they barricaded them. So these are some of the folk that are sitting in a barricade. They've been there since January. I was there in May, and they take turns personing this. So they have to, some of them sleep there, they take turns, they bring food, they even bring their animals there, and they cook there. And they were so generous, they offered Julia and I some potatoes from their growing, from their, gardens. I thanked them, but I couldn't use potatoes, but they were so kind, to offer me their food. And I heard them speak. They spoke, about why they were doing this. I asked them, why are you doing this? And they stood up one by one and said things like, we have to do this. This is our land. We have to preserve this for our future generations. It was very powerful. And another time they asked Julia and I, they said, do you know any lawyers in the city who could help us? So I did not. But I'll tell you something else in a moment. So this is another town. So we went to 2 towns affected by mining. And this is another one called Itogon. Did I have the sign? Itogon. And this young man's name is Robert. And he was our tour guide. He's 18 years old. He has graduated from college. So that's Robert. And this is the pastor. So this is the pastor and his wife and 3 kids. So they fed us like they were our hosts. But Julia and I were placed in another home to stay overnight. And Robert, this young man, took us around. And Robert showed Julia how to pan for gold.
Oh, yes. That's an
You
interesting
see,
experience.
Everybody in this town has been a miner. That's the only job they have. So if their father was a miner, the children become miners. So all these kids are going to be miners. There isn't any other job for them. So Robert ran the youth group. So he did the songs, the brief message. He read a passage from the scripture. He gave a message. He talked about how we're all made in the image of God. It was wonderful, to bring us, to uplift all of us. And there was some singing. And then they started sharing, talking. They were sitting in the pews and we were talking back and forth. And then one 18-year-old, another person, an 18-year-old man asked me, he said, how much is 1 gram of gold in Canada? Does anyone know how much 1 gram of gold you could get now? I guess you could Google it. I see Jackie Googling it.
No, actually, I was going to say, I remember a time that it was, I think, 450 an ounce.
Oh.
But I don't know. I can Google it though.
How does ounce?
Sorry, a gram is about $45. Depending on if it's 10, if it's 10 carat, 14 carat, or 18. I believe the 18 is about $45 a gram.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Carmen. So in the Philippines, the reason they ask is they have to get enough gold. So there's independent gold, so it's not just the big mining companies. Each of these people have small mining, like there are holes, there are mining shafts for them to go into. So they use very rudimentary equipment and they go in and try to get as much stuff as they can and bring it out again. So they have to get enough to get 1 gram of gold in order to sell it to a middle person who gives them 2,000 pesos, which is about $50. So how much did you say, Carmen? Anyway,
It's like about $45, like depending on if it's 10, if it's 14, if it's 18 and or 22. So that's a lot of money, $50
okay.
US.
Yeah, they said it's 18K of gold, but I got the feeling that they were getting very little, of course, because they have to sell it to a middle person, and the middle person wants to make money. So whatever the amount is, they get very little for a gram of 18K gold. So maybe it's worth a lot more in the market. So it's kind of sad that that's all the prospect that they have is to work for the mines, even though the person like Robert has had college education, he can't use what he has outside in his community anyway. And yeah, so there's some good news is that the Cordillera People's Alliance, CPA, which is a partner of the United Church of Canada, who organized the tour for us, they're helping with these issues. They're writing all kinds of documentation. They're supporting these communities to try to get justice and try to get the word out. And people like our United Church in Canada, are spreading the word to others. So through your mission and service fund money, you are helping United Church to share our funds with the CPA, call it Cordillera People's Alliance. Okay, so I want to tell you about another story. This is also north of Manila. This is a town called in La Union province. And the reason I went there was that I met a woman in Canada, Winnie, who, like thousands of overseas workers, had to leave the Philippines to work overseas because they can't make enough money in their town in the Philippines. They have to seek employment elsewhere. So many of you will know workers like Filipino caregivers, right? Oh my goodness. And they have to go overseas to support their family. So Winnie has a husband and 2 children. These are her 2 kids. Back then they were like 10 and 12 years old. Now Wilbur and Reza. So this is their church. It's the UCCP, United Church of Christ in the Philippines. And that's the pastor in red. And after church, they had a food and fellowship like us. I'm sure many of you love that. We're good at that. So they did that. We had a prayer, food, and they had one of my favorite things, Lawrence, dancing. Maybe we could do that after fellowship as well, dancing. Yeah, it's like a square dance kind of thing. You call what to do and everybody joins in. So Winnie's mother is this woman that I'm dancing with. And back then she was probably close to 80. She just died a month ago, actually, of COVID. And she was about 90. Yeah, very sad because Winnie has not seen her mother in 8 years.
Wow.
And she was going to go last December to visit, but because of COVID, they postponed the trip. And now her mother just died. So it was because of Winnie that I went to visit this town. She introduced me to them, and Julia and I stayed in Winnie's mother's house. So it was a lovely experience, and I met her kids and her husband. And they are now in Canada for 5 years now, the husband and 2 kids. She was able to sponsor them. And we just they came to my birthday party last week. So the kids are now, I don't know, 20 and 22. And one's in college and one's in high school. So her kids are doing well. And Winnie works at Viva in Thornhill. Now we're back in the south, in the Mindanao area. And this is Pastor Vladius. So he was my tour guide this time. So this is some of the scenery you'll see along as we drove to get to the town. Rice paddies, okay. And then he took us on for me, it was an adventure. We were going to he took us to a small village where the United Church of Christ in the Philippines we're assisting with a group of people, a community of indigenous people who are also UCCP, who are United Church. So to get there, we had to go on these motorcycles with 3 people on each one. Okay. No
Okay.
helmets, no seat belts.
You're lucky it was only 3. I've seen them whether there's 6 and 7.
I know, and they put a plank across and put more people. Yeah, fortunately this was not, but yeah. But look at the muddy road. That's how muddy. We had to get up and walk this part. And Julia's bare feet.
Well, the kids.
And the kids.
More than bare feet.
So we had to walk this part, you see, from here to there. Okay, but it was worthwhile. Once we got there, we were welcomed. This was a welcome dance that they did for us. It's called a Manobo tribe. And early on, I guess they became Christians. And then can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So here I was giving a short talk, probably saying hello, happy to be here. And they Pastor Vladius translated for me. So here, I guess he had to speak the language in order for them to understand. And then again, dancing, you see, I feel just very much at home. Dancing after, and there was food, of course. They served us boiled, something like sweet potatoes. They just boil it and you just eat it. It was delicious. So they were called Manobo tribe, again, indigenous folk. This is beautiful. A mother, look at her necklace. I think they're beads. Just amazing. Beautiful. So some of the issues they're facing are militarization. The government is the government is harassing them because government suspects them of harboring the New People's Army, which is a communist group. So the government's harassing them. So that's one issue. The other issue is that they're experiencing landslides. So the things that they're planting are being destroyed when there's a big amount of rain. So the UCCP is helping them with organic farming, with doing, more small crops and avoiding expensive fertilizers. So UCCP is there to help them, to assist them. And then around 2 o'clock, we were there maybe from 10 o'clock to 2. And by 2 o'clock, they said we had to leave right away because rain was coming. We didn't want to be caught in the rain or after the rain because we won't be able to get out. So we had to leave right away, and we just got home in time. See, we got wet. But can you imagine with a little bit of rain on the road that you saw, we would have been slip sliding away. And they gave us necklaces. Look at the beaded necklace that Julie and I are wearing. Isn't that beautiful? And this woman, she also came with us. So beautiful handcrafted beads. These are just some of the transport that you'll see, just some general pictures. Oh, okay. Do we have time for one more story? Or do we?
Absolutely. This is interesting.
Okay, well, it's hard to fit in 2 months of a visit, but I just highlighting. This is a surprise. I think I hooked up with another group from Canada, and we got to visit a medium security prison. Has anybody ever been to visit a prison? No. Okay, so this was quite amazing. We went to visit the prisoners who were political prisoners. Okay, so You know, they didn't really do anything wrong, but they were trumped up charges against them. And the person who brought us to it was, I forgot her name now, but she herself had been imprisoned many years ago for political reasons, and she was eventually released. But I can't imagine her getting back into prison to give us a tour. You know, if I were her, I would not want to step back in prison. But she is our tour guide. So this prison is like a village, a small village. They're able to make crafts and sell them. And I wish one regret I had is I wish I bought something from them to support them, but I didn't think of that. So they make crafts. I think these are made of
They're stuffed lizards.
stuff. Lee said it's a stuffed lizard. Some things are made of shells, wood. Okay, this one's made of wood. It's a carved ship inside a bottle. I don't know how he did that. Okay, so these folk have not seen their family can visit them as well, but only like once a week. But they've been away from their family for 5-10 years, you know, for things that were not valid, like were unjust. You know, they were imprisoned. And then they sang to us. They sang the most beautiful song to us, and we were just all crying because we were feeling so bad for them. And yet they were the ones, you know, ministering to us. We were just like in tears. Oh my God, how can they sing when they're in such a sad situation? Just so sad, like they, you know, they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have lawyers to support them, and they have to pay for their food. Like they rely on their relatives to bring them food. Like we brought them food as well. That was one thing we had to do. We purchased food and we brought it and shared it with them because they don't get fed hardly anything there.
Were they ill-treated?
I don't think they're ill-treated there, but it was unjust in the first place that they're kept in prison.
They're just taken out of political circulation.
Yeah, they were taken out of political circulation, so they can't do their political work, and put in prison for trumped up charges that were unjust, were lies. So it's very sad. They can't be with their family. They can't, you know, earn a living. They're now dependent on other people. And so the other part of my trip was visiting churches who are relatives of our church in Canada. So one of them is the Central United Church in Manila, United Methodist Church. And the reason I went to this particular church was because I knew someone from Asbury in West United Church, and she told me her uncle, who is this man in green, goes to this church. So I found him and was able to say hello and take a picture with him to show it to the person back home. But I also met Norma, who was at the Union Theological Seminary, and I met Lizette Pearl and her husband. She's a professor at the Union Theological Seminary, and she has visited Canada as well and given lectures. So it's a great connection. Even though it was a short visit, I'm able to say, you know, I visited you in Manila. And the church service was very much like ours. What is this, Christine?
Pardon?
Christine? What are they doing, Christine?
Oh, they're singing, obviously.
Yeah, they have a choir and they processed up very reverently and they sang. And then this is another church, UCCP Ellenwood. So the other one was Methodist, and this is United Church of Christ in the Philippines, Ellenwood in Manila. This is outside. So all of these churches were brought in by the American missionaries, is my guess. And this is inside the UCCP church. Doesn't that look familiar?
Look at them all. Good night.
I was part of that. Yeah, I attended the service, and it happened to be in English, this one. Sometimes they have English, sometimes they have Tagalog, but this was in English. So look what it says on the PowerPoint.
Oh, that's terrific.
I'm going to read it in case some people can't read it. God created the heavens and the earth. Everything else is made in China. love hearing your laughter. So he was, believe it or not, he was preaching about the creation, about the environment, and about recycling. And that could have been a sermon that I preach. It was just exactly like he talked about the importance of recycling and preserving the environment.
Oh,
So I had a picture with him afterwards.
you
Yeah.
stand up and clap when he started.
Yeah, I wanted to. We gotta borrow this, eh? This quote, maybe put it on our outdoor sign.
I was just going to say, put it on the sign. Put it on the sign. I love it.
Got it.
Picture, okay.
Food.
And guess what? After church,
Food.
there was no dancing this time, but they were selling food.
Oh, there
Wow.
was
Selling food outside the church, and the money goes to the church, of course. It's a fundraiser for the church. So there was not just cakes, but main food like noodles, meat, pop, everything. And they sold it in plastic bags. So for you to take away, you take it away and eat it at home, or very nice. So that's UCCP Ellenwood. So these are just, I'm closing now. I've got about a couple more slides left. So this is with my cousin. This is a horse-drawn carriage. And we used to take this a lot when I was there, up to 1973, and they still have it. It's called Calesa. And I used to ride this with my mother, to go to the market, to go shopping. So now it's more tourist kind of thing to ride them. It's just for novelty. Goodbye, Manila. So it was, a trip that had a lot of difficult stories to hear, but I also felt a lot of hope from the people. I'm going to stop sharing, and so I can see all of you. Do you have any questions?
What's the political situation in the Philippines right now?
Oh dear. Lee asked me for the political situation right now. Lee probably knows the answer. Well, it's still even more difficult now. The human rights
This is worse, much worse.
abuses are terrible under Duterte, the president. He vowed to fight drugs, but by doing so, he's just killing people. Like anybody who's suspected of drug trafficking, he kills them.
Or even drug use.
Or drug use. And so children are left orphaned, like they see their parents dying. There's no trials. He just goes and kills them. And that's how he fights drug war. And of course, anyone who speaks out against him.
And we don't hear a lot of that here.
No, we don't.
That's unfortunate.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
But unfortunately, a lot of people in the Philippines think that a hard approach is right, and they support him. And again, those who either legally or politically want to speak out against this are silenced. Not brutally, but court cases or intimidation or jail. It's very, very awkward.
Yeah.
Both the drilling and the mining, is there anything that we can do petition wisely? Because it's a Canadian company, we certainly could all write directly to the Canadian company.
Yes. We can find out. I know back then there were a lot of ideas, and the General Council, our United Church, did do something about that to make Canadian mining companies accountable.
Yeah, maybe let's bring that up.
It's the same in the DRC. It's the same in Africa as well. The Canadian companies have left them.
Yes.
But what is now called corporate social responsibility has taken hold. The United Church has been working on this for so long. Two of the ecumenical groups worked on this. And finally, mining companies, one I know quite well, called in Price Waterhouse to do an audit, an environmental and a social audit. It's now